double standards for Democrats, the horrible state of our media, and finally, a true story about the FBI. You're listening to the LaChance podcast. Welcome back once again to the LaChance podcast. I'm your host, Mike LaChance of the Legal Insurrection blog, as well as American Lookout, and a columnist for Town Hall. Thanks for tuning in again, and thanks for everyone who listened to last week's podcast, which was my best numbers ever. Big shout out to everyone at Ace of Spades HQ, as well as I Own the World Report, both of whom posted a link to the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. So I want to start out this week talking about what has become one of my favorite subjects, which is this double standard in the media for Democrats, specifically Joe Biden. So one thing that happened this week was that the publication, The Daily Beast, which you may have heard of, published this story where they basically declared that discussing Joe Biden's health is off limits, right? They start out by talking about how there have been whispers about Joe Biden's health on Fox News. Because, of course, Fox News is the source of all evil in the world to these people. So there's this long article. I'm not going to go into too much detail. But basically they say, people on Fox News have been talking about Joe Biden's health. And that's just not fair. And they shouldn't be doing that. And, they go into this whole thing about how it's his health is somehow off limits. Which is ridiculous for a few reasons. The first one is Joe Biden's age. I mean, given Joe Biden's age, his health is not off limits. In fact, his health should be a concern. These are the same people who, thought that John McCain's health was a major issue back in 2008, when in fact John McCain was younger in 2008 than Joe Biden is now. So if John McCain's health was an issue in 2008, then you better believe that Joe Biden's health is an issue in 2019, heading into 2020. But the best part of the whole article at the Daily Beast, which I'm going to read to you now, is this, quote, "In the news business, it is considered irresponsible to spread baseless, potentially damaging rumors about public figures," end quote. Let that sink in for a moment as you think back to how virtually the entire media has covered Trump for the last 2 years. And I mean, not just his physical health, but more specifically his mental health. And you may have heard about this, but back in early 2018, the Democrats teamed up with this psychiatry professor, who is in fact a psychiatrist, I guess. There have been some reports about her letting her license lapse or whatever, but if she's teaching psychiatry at Yale, she's a psychiatrist. And her name is Bandy Lee. And back in early 2018, she met with Democrats to talk to them about Trump's mental health and how deeply concerned she was because Trump was exhibiting signs of, basically not being in his right mind, which the Democrats loved. This was part of their multi-pronged effort to undo the 2016 election. The first angle that they were using was the whole Russia nonsense, which we now know was nonsense, even though many of us knew it was nonsense back then. But now that the Mueller report is out, we know that it's all nonsense. But they had this multi-pronged approach. So if the Russia thing didn't work out, then the next thing that they were going to fall back on was using the 25th Amendment to declare Trump mentally unfit for office and removing him from office that way. And this Yale psychiatrist, Bandy Lee, was helping them in this effort. And they got pushback from some people in media, mostly conservative media, obviously. But they just now have dusted this issue off again. And they've re-enlisted the same psychiatrist, Bandy Lee, and she's meeting with Democrats again to talk about Trump's mental health. Now, this has been going on for like a year and a half. But we've got the liberal Daily Beast telling us that Joe Biden's health is off limits. It's laughable on its face. And what makes it even more amazing is that if you go back in time and you search the Daily Beast, you come up with articles where they actually wrote about Trump's mental health. So they had an article in March of 2018 titled, "How Close is Donald Trump to a Psychiatric Breakdown?" And then they had another article that they published in 2017 titled, "These 27 Top Shrinks Think Trump Might Be Nuts." So on the one hand, we've got the Daily Beast pushing out more than one article advancing this false narrative that Trump is somehow mentally unfit for office. And then the same publication turns around and declares Joe Biden's health is off limits. And then they have the nerve to write in this article, again, I'm quoting, "In the news business, it is considered irresponsible to spread baseless, potentially damaging rumors about public figures." Well, I guess nobody at the Daily Beast actually reads the Daily Beast. And I guess nobody at the Daily Beast shared this information with CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, CBS, ABC, NBC. I could go on and on and on. It's a ridiculous double standard. And it's just amazing that you have to wonder, like, do they really believe this? Have they really convinced themselves of this? Or do they know that they're lying to us? Do they know that they're telling us one thing while doing another? Or have they convinced themselves that they're not doing that? It's something you really have to marvel at. You really have to marvel at it. And while we're on the subject of the Daily Beast, this is the same publication that just a couple of weeks ago searched out and doxed a public citizen for the crime of sharing a video on social media that made fun of Nancy Pelosi. This guy, is just some guy, just some like blue collar guy. And he shares this video of Nancy Pelosi that's been slowed down and supposedly to make her seem like she's intoxicated or something. It's just a funny political video. That's all it is. It's something that, 10 years ago, no one would have thought twice about. And by the way, some of the late night shows have actually done this to Trump. But then it was a different thing, like it's okay for the late night shows to make fun of Trump in this way. These are people with, money and power and influence and staffs of people and multi-million dollar budgets. But if some blue collar guy from East Nowhere does it on his Facebook page, then the Daily Beast is going to send out reporters to find out who he is and expose him publicly. That's who these people are. It's amazing. And, it's not that different from what CNN did. A couple of years ago, CNN hunted down this older woman who had shared something on her Facebook page, which apparently was tangentially connected to like Russia somehow. I don't know if it was like an anti-Democrat thing or a pro-Trump thing. It really doesn't even matter. But the point is, CNN sent a reporter to find this woman at her home and confronted her in her front yard, saying basically, well, did you know that when you shared that, you were sharing something that's connected to Russia? And she was like, who are you? Like, get out of here. Yeah, I mean, this is what happens when they can't hold Nancy Pelosi accountable. They can't hold Chuck Schumer accountable or any of the top Democrats. But boy, if you're a private citizen who criticizes them, they'll come after you. And you know what? We saw a preview of this in 2008. I don't know if you remember this. Remember the story of Joe the plumber? Joe the plumber who just happened to be standing on a sidewalk when candidate Obama came walking down the sidewalk with his entourage and was kind of shaking hands and talking to people. And he managed to have a sort of quick exchange with Joe the plumber. And Joe the plumber said something like, well, if you're going to raise my taxes, I'm not sure if I like the idea of that. And Obama said something to the effect of, well, I think that when we spread the wealth around, that's a good thing for everyone. And that line from Obama about spreading the wealth around, that kind of went viral. And everybody in media was talking about it. And the way that the media protected Obama was by not focusing on what Obama said, but by going after Joe the plumber. So within 48 hours of this exchange with Obama, we knew Joe the plumber's real name. We knew that he wasn't really a plumber after all. And we also knew that he had like some tax problems in the past. Like somebody in government where this guy lived actually leaked his tax information to the media. And this is what the media does, is that, if you make a Democrat look bad, they're not going to focus on the thing the Democrat did or said. They're going to come after you. And that's just what they did with Joe the Plumber, and that's just what they did with this guy with the Pelosi video. So we've seen it happen more than once, and it's amazing. It's an amazing thing to watch. Sometimes it's easy to understand why Trump gets so much traction when he says that the media is the enemy of the people. It's because sometimes the media acts that way. Sometimes the media behaves in such a way that it really seems that they are more interested in attacking a private citizen than they are in holding a public figure accountable if it's a public figure that they like. Now, if it's a public figure they don't like pretty much any Republican, then they'll go after the Republican for what the person said, the Republican said or did, rather than the person who questioned them. But when it's reversed, the person who gets the investigative report treatment is the private citizen and not the Democrat public figure. It's kind of amazing. Staying on the subject of Biden, though, I have one more thought on him, something that I said on Twitter this week, which has stayed with me because the more I think about it, the more I think that this is true. I think that Joe Biden is operating under the mistaken idea that the media is going to treat him the way that they treated Obama in 2008. I think he's very wrong. Now, if Joe Biden becomes the nominee, then he definitely will get treated better. But I think the primary is going to be a lot rougher for him. And I don't think that he's going to get the nice treatment that he's expecting. The other thing to consider is, Obama hasn't endorsed him. And I know that Biden made a big deal of saying, well, I asked Obama not to endorse me. Whatever. Yeah, like anybody believes that. But the fact is that, he announced weeks ago, and Obama has yet to say a word. Now, one thing that did happen this week, which I thought was fascinating, was you probably saw that Joe Biden tweeted out this picture, which looked like something that had been tweeted by like a sixth grader. He tweets out this picture of a friendship bracelet that says Joe and Barack. And then in the caption in his tweet, he said something like, just saying hi to my best friend Obama. And this got dragged on social media big time. But the most amazing thing about it was that David Axelrod, who was the senior advisor for Obama in 2008 and in 2012, responded to Joe Biden's tweet by saying, this is a joke, right? That is astounding. That is astounding. And another person who worked in Obama's administration, Jen Psaki, went on CNN and said something like, Biden seems rusty and out of touch. I mean, these are his former coworkers. These are people who he worked with as part of the Obama administration. And, it's one thing for Obama to remain silent. That's an indicator that something is not going right. But when people who were involved with Joe and Obama in the Obama administration start saying things like this, I don't think that's good news for Joe. So, anyway, that's all I have to say on that topic. Let's move on. I want to talk a little bit more about the media. So let's get to that. One of the things that I find amazing about the left, and when I say the left, you have to understand that I'm using that as sort of an umbrella term for all of the Democrat media complex. So I'm talking about the Democrat Party, their voters, their supporters in media, their supporters in Hollywood, sort of the whole shebang. So the left thinks, you probably know this, but it bears repeating. The left thinks that Trump is a fluke. They think that Trump was a mistake, that the American people made a mistake by voting in Trump as president. And that's part of the reason why you see this mad clown car dash from Democrats for all the people who are running for president on the Democratic side in 2020, is because so many of them actually believe this, and they actually think that they have a shot, when I would say 95% of them have no chance whatsoever. You know, I mean, maybe the top people, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, maybe these people have a chance. I'm still optimistic that Trump is going to win 4 more years, no matter who the Democratic nominee is. But most of the people who are running have no chance at all. None. I mean, somebody like Eric Swalwell, if he were the nominee, Trump would win 49 states easily. But the entire left thinks that this was just a mistake, you know, and that 2020 is going to be a chance to fix the mistake. They don't believe that the American people actually meant or wanted to do this. And that's part of the problem. You see it reflected in the way that they talk. Now, I'll give you a perfect example. This is a quote from Joe Biden. This week, he was interviewed somewhere on the campaign trail. And this is what he said, word for word. I'm reading you right now. Quote, 4 years of Donald Trump would be an aberration in American history. 8 years will fundamentally change who we are as a nation. Now, one of the most amazing things about that quote, and I'll read it again in a moment, see if you can pick out the 2 words in that quote that sound really familiar. Here, I'll read it again. 4 years of Donald Trump would be an aberration in American history. 8 years will fundamentally change who we are as a nation. Do the 2 words that I'm thinking of stick out to you? The 2 words I'm thinking of are fundamentally change. Because, Joe, wasn't that kind of like a rallying cry for your running mate in 2008? You know, everything is different when they do it. You know, everything is it's that old internet meme, you know, of a sort of a Democrat wearing like a soldier uniform, carrying like a Democratic National Committee flag, saying it's different when we do it. And that's totally true. Because that is what Obama said just before the 2008 election. He said, you know, we're just days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America. And the ironic thing about it is that, and Joe knows this, and all the people in the Democratic Party know this, Trump has already made some transformational changes to the United States. I mean, you look at the judiciary. He's gotten over 100 judges confirmed at multiple levels. He's got 2 new judges sitting on the United States Supreme Court. And he could, if he gets another term, he could conceivably add 2 more judges to the Supreme Court, which is another reason why the left is completely freaking out. Because for years, the left, the Democrats, they've depended on the Supreme Court to do things that they can't get done through legislation. You know, if the people won't vote on something that the Democrats want, then they go, okay, well, if we can't get it passed as a law in Congress, then we'll just make the Supreme Court tell everyone that it has to be this way from now on. And that's part of the reason why the left is panicking over the Supreme Court, because if the Supreme Court has a majority of originalist judges who, you know, are interpreting the Constitution as written, then they won't be able to do that anymore, and that's trouble for them. But anyway, this is one of the things that they just can't wrap their minds around, is that, you know, this person, Trump, who they told us, you know, would be horrible and wouldn't know what he was doing, and he would be a buffoon, and he would be dangerous, and, you know, every bad word you can think of, has done some amazing things. I mean, you look at the economy, unemployment is way down, GDP is way up. Trump hasn't involved us in any new foreign entanglements. He's trying to bring soldiers home from other locations. I mean, for the most part, he's doing things that people on the left have always claimed that they wanted. But because it's Trump who did it, and he's, the bad orange man, they have to hate what he's done, even if it's something that they would have liked if a different president did it. But because of all these things that Trump has gotten done, and because the economy is great, and because we're not embroiled in a new war, and because unemployment is so low, this is one of the reasons why Democrats are talking about things like climate change nonstop, and inventing new forms of bigotry out of thin air, and talking about how, what a racist nation we live in. They have nothing else to talk about. They can't run against the economy. They can't run against Trump on foreign policy. So what are they going to talk about? They're going to talk about things like climate change and free college and we have to impeach Trump. And they're doing all that because they really just don't have anything else. They have nothing else to run on. Except for Bernie. In Bernie's case, what Bernie's running on is basically, completely changing the system by replacing capitalism with socialism, which would be a disaster for the nation. But I don't think Bernie has much of a chance anyway, so we don't have to panic about that yet. That's one thing that we don't necessarily have to panic about yet. Anyway, enough of that. I'm going to end up this week. I've got a story to tell you. It's a true story, and I think this is the first time that I've ever told it outside of a sort of family and friends setting. So give me just a moment to recalibrate, and then I will tell the story. Okay, so here it is. This is, like I said, this is an absolutely true story. There is literally not a single part of this story that I'm making up. Now, I have no proof to back it up because there wasn't any audio and there was no video. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. Here it is. Back in the mid to late 90s, I worked in the car business. I've had a lot of different jobs over the course of my lifetime. And for a few years in the mid to late 90s, I was a car salesman. And it was an interesting line of work. You meet all kinds of people when you're in a sales job where you deal with the general public. It's one thing to do like sort of inside sales, business to business in a niche market. But if you're selling something more universal like cars, almost every family has at least one car. Lots of families have more than one car. So you meet all kinds of people from all walks of life. And that was one of the most interesting aspects of the job. So out of all the hundreds and hundreds of people that I sold cars to over a few years, there was one time when I sold a car to an FBI agent. And I didn't even really know that until we were about halfway through the process. This was a guy who came into the dealership and knew exactly what model of car he wanted, knew like what options he wanted, knew what color he wanted, and I just happened to have the exact thing that he was looking for. So that made the process much easier. I took him for a test drive. He loved the car. We went back to the dealership. He was a very informed consumer. He knew exactly what he wanted to pay, so there wasn't a lot of negotiation. So the deal was done very quickly. And as I'm writing up the paperwork, we started chit-chatting. And at some point I asked him what he did for a living. And he told me he was an FBI agent. Now, this was like, again, the mid to late 90s. So this was the TV show The X-Files was at the height of its popularity. And I was a fan. I watched it every Sunday night after The Simpsons. So as I was writing up this guy's paperwork, I had to ask him this question. I said, is there really an X-Files type of department at the FBI? And without even sort of blinking, he said, yeah, there is. And I followed up because my curiosity was piqued, and I said, who works on the X-Files? And he looked at me and he said, weird people. That was his exact response. 2 words. Weird people. And I was so stunned by his answer that I sort of didn't know how to react. So I just went back to writing up the paperwork. And I never saw him again. And of course, I have never worked for the FBI, so I have no way to confirm whether or not what he told me was true, but I never forgot that exchange. And I've told that story dozens of times over the years. This is the first time I've told it in this sort of setting. So, there you go. Are there X-Files? Yes. Who works on the X-Files? According to this customer, weird people. That's who works on the X-Files. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. I'll be back again next week. Again, thanks very much for listening over these many weeks now. And have a great weekend. And until next time, keep it real.